I was the woman of an organized crime boss. After our wedding, he doted on me, engaging in public displays of affection, PDA, for the media. I thought he loved me to the bone, wanting the whole world to know of his affection. That is, until I overheard a conversation between him and one of his men. I run in both the legitimate and the criminal worlds, and I have so many rivals. If I don't make Sarah my Achilles heel, how can Ashley be safe? So all the injuries I sustained for him were a joke? Well, someone else can be the target. David, aren't you going too far? Sarah is still recovering from her serious injuries, and just because that woman had a minor squabble with someone, you're flying out to see her? You're putting both yourself and Sarah in danger. The voice of David's brother came from a crack in the wall. I stopped in my tracks, stunned for a second. There were many hidden rooms in the mansion, and they were well soundproofed unless people were particularly agitated. A moment later, I heard the sound of something being smashed. What do you mean you only love Ashley? Sarah has been your scapegoat for so many years, she deserves better. You don't love Sarah at all, so why don't you let her leave? If it were that other woman, you'd be 6 feet under by now. Shut up! If I don't make Sarah my Achilles heel, how can Ashley be safe? After being Mrs. Gu for so many years, she has nothing to complain about. David's voice was clear and deep. I leaned against the wall, unable to digest the information I had just received. All these years, David loved someone else? And I was just a scapegoat? Staggering back to my room, the wound on my abdomen, sustained for him, tore open, oozing blood. But the pain in my body was nothing compared to the pain in my heart. The carefully cut apple David had prepared for me by the bed seemed like a joke. He was so good to me, so flamboyant and unrestrained, that everyone envied me. David had many businesses in the border tow. And he could be said to have connections in both the legitimate and criminal worlds. In the past 5 years, I had been kidnapped 3 times for him, taken a knife for him twice, and taken a bullet once. I was even willing to give up my life for him. I thought he loved me to the bone, but it was all a lie. You were just outside? David's voice suddenly rang out behind me. Tears streamed down my face as I met his smiling eyes. Countless times, I had secretly rejoiced at my luck in marrying such a handsome man. But now, I saw bone-chilling coldness in his eyes. Sarah, are you afraid of me? What were you doing just now? He was too clever. I forced a smile. I just woke up. I was so scared when I didn't see you. I haven't recovered yet. It only took 1 night for me to go from an ordinary student to the woman of a crime boss. After the first kidnapping, I developed a condition where I would tremble with fear whenever I couldn't see David. He didn't suspect anything and soothingly stroked my lips. His slender fingers gently traced my jawline, teasing me at my ear before moving to my neck. I couldn't help but gasp. That mischievous hand finally rested on my waist, the heat from his palm igniting every inch of my skin. I'm leaving for a day tomorrow, you be a good girl and stay at home. He kissed me lightly on the lips, his words turning into hot air that sprayed on my ear. I couldn't help but shiver, grabbing his clothes with both hands. David, the wound. His expression changed, and he quickly stripped me bare, his handsome eyebrows furrowing as he looked at the gauze stained with blood. Sarah, are you trying to worry me to death? He personally changed the gauze for me. The concern in his eyes seemed genuine. But the words I had just heard echoed repeatedly in my mind. He was leaving for a day. What was he going to do that day? Was he going to see the one he was protecting with my life? That night, David held me in his arms and slept soundly. But I was sleepless all night, and only opened my eyes the next day after he left and I confirmed that he was on the plane. It was only a short distance from the bedroom to the home office. He kept all my things in his home office. From our first anniversary to my most recent birthday, every detail was neatly arranged. Anyone who saw it would marvel at his deep affection for me. Only I knew that in the hidden compartment of the drawer was a diary that didn't belong to me. David had told me about it when he was drunk, apologizing for many things. But at that time, I was completely focused on him and didn't pay attention. And he had forgotten that he told me the next day when he woke up. Opening the hidden compartment, I brushed the dust off the diary. The password on it was very elaborate, showing how much the owner of the diary valued it. I never thought that the cryptography I studied in college would come in handy at this moment. The lock clicked open, and I opened the first page. David's forceful handwriting wrote 3 words, Ashley. The first 10 pages were all about how he loved Ashley. The words were so careful, so passionate and timid that I had never seen that side of him before. He was always so at ease with me. I thought he had matured and wouldn't have that youthful passion anymore. It turned out it was because he didn't love me. The last page was written in a mess. Ashley was assassinated. She's right, people in our line of work shouldn't have lovers. I have to send her away. After that, it turned into yellowed layers. There were fewer and fewer words. That little girl is so easy to fool. I thought of Ashley today. That little girl thinks I'm talking about her. It doesn't matter, let her misunderstand. That way, Ashley will be safe. She shouldn't mind being killed as my wife. I will be punished. I arranged a kidnapping, but it was all within my control. She became traumatized as expected. She can never leave me in this life. I will spend my whole life compensating her. I desperately pressed my eyes, afraid that tears would fall. So the person he wanted to be with openly was never me. Our meeting, falling in love, marriage, and happiness, from the beginning until now, was all my own Truman Show life. Closing the diary, I carefully put it back in its place and left the home office before daring to let my tears fall. I curled up into a ball. The scene of the first kidnapping flashed through my mind. At that time, David and I were inseparable. I had just come out of the hospital and wanted to tell him the good news that I was pregnant, but I lost consciousness after getting into a car. Those beasts dragged me on the ground, and the excessive cold and cruel torture prevented me from keeping the baby. When David rushed in and held me in his arms, I only had a hazy consciousness left. It was also at that time that I developed a psychological disorder, unable to leave David for long periods of time, and my body was completely ruined. David comforted me, saying it didn't matter if we didn't have a child. It turned out that he had never thought of having a child with me from the beginning, and he had personally cut off all my possibilities. The salvation and deep affection I thought I had found were actually his self-directed and self-acted scheme. The pain in my chest made it hard for me to breathe. Unable to resist the somatization, I fell on the bed, convulsing uncontrollably. In this extreme pain, I gradually calmed down. Every detail of being with David flashed through my mind. In these 5 years, I had experienced countless life and death situations, and he had tried his best to save me every time, risking his own life. His concern for me was real. It was just that he was afraid that if I died, the danger would fall on his the one that got away. I trembled as I picked up my phone and checked David's transaction records over the years. He had a company overseas that mainly dealt in jewelry. All the gifts he had given me over the years came from that company. That company didn't make any profit externally. Every year, the only money that went through it, besides the $100 million that David regularly transferred, was the money allocated by the GU Group. The scope of its operations was very wide, and every one of his products would appear on that woman named Ashley. I saw Ashley's account on Facebook. She was living very well in a mansion by the coast. The latest update showed her holding hands with a man. The caption read, "My love, so close yet so far." I kept zooming in on the picture. The man had ruby wedding bands on his ring finger that matched Ashley's, and there was a white mark on his wrist. David had told me that he didn't like wearing rings, so there were no rings at our wedding ceremony. I actually thought he didn't like them and personally braided a bracelet for him to wear on his wrist. That day, he lowered his head and kissed the bracelet, saying it was his lucky charm and he would never take it off. But as soon as he saw Ashley, he took off the bracelet. It wasn't that he didn't like wearing rings, but that he didn't like wearing rings with me. I continued scrolling down. On February 14th, David gave Ashley a sapphire necklace, made from the best part of a whole sapphire. That day, David also gave me a blue rhinestone necklace. On July 7th, David bought the best silk scarf and made a whole set of clothes for Ashley. That day, David gave me a silk scarf. Page after page, I buried myself in the pillow, silently laughing and convulsing. My pulse seemed to stop beating in this madness. In David's eyes, I was just Ashley's scraps, her scapegoat. All the gifts he gave me were just afterthoughts from the carefully prepared gifts for Ashley. 5 years of love and affection vanished in an instant. I cried all night. During that time, David sent me a message. I used to think he loved me and wanted to know about me every day. Now I knew he was just Afra. ID that his scapegoat would run away. In that case, how could I let him get his way? Early the next morning, I contacted a lawyer and asked him to cancel all my identity information as quickly as possible. David came back late at night, and as soon as he entered the house, he couldn't wait to bury himself in my neck. Baby/sweetheart, did you miss me? I couldn't sleep all night without you. There were dark circles under his eyes, and he really looked like he hadn't slept all night. In the past, I would have been very touched. But now I didn't dare to move. It was clear that the person he loved wasn't me, and this affectionate appearance made me sick. Are you shy? He chuckled softly and pulled me into his arms with a forceful tug, eliciting a soft moan from me. I was like his doll, and he didn't care if I was asleep or not. Tears slipped from the corners of my eyes and were quickly absorbed by the pillow, as if the sadness had never existed. The next morning, as soon as I opened my eyes, I saw David's dark face. Thinking of his reputation outside, I shrank back in fear. Your phone rang. What did you cancel? I quickly looked down at my phone. It was a message from the lawyer. He had already helped me with the identity wiped clean, and it would take effect in 3 hours. I forced a smile. It's nothing, just an email address. I used to use it, but it's been too long, and I was afraid it would be recovered and leave traces, so I just canceled it. Oh. David leaned closer to me meaningfully, his large hand gripping the back of my head, plundering every inch of my air until I was limp in his arms. Sarah, don't lie to me, don't betray me. I nodded desperately, tears welling up in my eyes. Extreme fear made my fingertips cold. Soon I would be able to escape from him. Soon, there would be no more Sarah by David's side. Fortunately, the phone rang in time, and David didn't go any further. What? You said Ashley is back? Who let her come? Wait for me, I'm comin'. Gee now. David's voice was gloomy, and he left quickly, without even giving me a look. I kept telling myself to breathe. Before I left, I had one more thing to do. Even if my identity was wiped clean, I didn't want the name Sarah to be written together with David. Adjusting my emotions, I received a text message from the private investigator. The string of numbers above was Ashley's phone number. Hello, I'm David's wife. Let's meet. The meeting place was chosen by Ashley. It was at the Grand Metropolitan Hotel. Separated by a screen, I heard heavy breathing. Can't you listen to me? It's not safe by my side. I had seen David cold, gentle, in every side of him, but this was the first time I heard his helpless voice. I miss you so much. I'm getting married soon, and you still won't see me. Have you really fallen in love with your wife? Don't talk nonsense. I'm only doing this to keep you safe. The two exchanged sweet words before David left. He was always vigilant, but this time, he didn't notice that there was an extra person outside the screen. I couldn't see my expression, but it must have been bitter and sarcastic. David is gone. You're so pathetic, but as a woman, I'm willing to talk to you. Ashley walked out from behind the screen, her eyes full of the victor's smugness. Her skin was rosy, and she wore clothes that were both appropriate and flattering, her exposed skin like white jade. I looked down at the casual wear I was wearing. Since being with David, I didn't dare to wear any pretty clothes because I didn't have the courage to show the scars on my body. Constant injuries made me look much weaker than Ashley. She was already mocking me just by standing there and looking me up and down. I'm not here to fight you for David. I've been by his side long enough, he may not be without feelings for me. After being with David for so many years, I had also learned to bluff. You're meeting me today to make me give up, right? I know I can't compare to you. I just want his autograph as a souvenir. When I left the hotel, my steps were much lighter. For the past 2 days, I had tried every means to pester David. He went from cooperating at first to becoming impatient. But it didn't matter as long as I achieved my goal. 2 days later, Ashley actually gave me a signature. I breathed a sigh of relief when I saw the signature and quickly went to print out the divorce papers. Early on the third day, my identity wiped clean was complete. I packed up all the gifts David had given me, along with that diary, and placed them in the most conspicuous place in the mansion. These scraps from someone else were better off returned to their original owner. And all my belongings were burned to ashes just before I boarded the plane. Inside the departure lounge, I turned on my phone and sent a message to Ashley, with only 2 words, "Thank you." Just as the phone was about to shut down, David's text messages flooded the notification bar. "Baby/sweetheart, I'm almost home. I bought a birthday cake. It's your favorite strawberry cake. I'm sorry, baby/sweetheart, Ashley is not feeling well. She's all alone here, so I'm going to see her first." The phone completely shut down, and the darkened screen couldn't display the rest of his words. But I didn't need to see them to know that he was going to be with Ashley. I broke the SIM card and threw it into the trash can, following the boarding announcement as I boarded the plane. At the same time, inside a dance hall, Ashley leaned weakly against David, her face flushed with alcohol. "David, I'm fine. Go back and be with Sarah. It was my fault. I couldn't help but miss you and called you." Her eyes were full of tears. David's phone was lying beside him, dimly lit. It wasn't until the 2 of them came out of the dance hall that he saw dozens of missed calls on his phone. The moment the call connected, his brother Stanley's voice was panicked and trembling. "David!" A lawyer came to the company to deliver the divorce papers. "Sarah found out about your relationship with Miss Jiang. We can't get through to Sarah's phone. We can't contact Sarah through any channel." David suddenly clenched his phone. The words divorce papers swirled in his mind. He didn't expect me to divorce him. After all, I loved him so much when we were together, so much that I was willing to give up my life for him. "What did you say? Say it again." David's voice was slow and low. Stanley on the other end of the phone didn't even bother to be afraid, his voice even carrying a sob. "David, I really can't contact Sarah. A lawyer just came over and dropped off the divorce papers and left. There's also a property division agreement behind the papers, which includes the company you opened overseas for Miss Jiang. Could Sarah know that you've been using her as a shield? She's been by your side for 5 years and knows a lot of things. If she gets angry and exposes it, then we'll be..." "Shut up!" Waves of frustration crashed against David's heart. "Suppress the matter and wait for me to go back and handle it." "David, what's wrong?" Ashley tugged at his sleeve. David suppressed his annoyance and pressed a few buttons on his phone. "Sarah is missing. I'll have someone take you to a hotel." A flash of joy appeared in Ashley's eyes, and she leaned softly against David. "She's just a target anyway, David. I feel so bad. Let them look for her. Can't you stay with me? Don't be unreasonable." David's expression turned cold, and he let his men drag Ashley out of the passenger seat. His attitude made Ashley unable to believe it. It was clear that as long as she pouted before, David would unconditionally compromise. David had done more than once the thing of leaving me, who was seriously injured and on the verge of death, to run overseas to accompany her. This time I just disappeared, but he didn't care about her at all. "Didn't you marry her just to protect my safety? David, how can you not care about my discomfort because of her?" Ashley's voice faded away. David slammed the steering wheel hard. He floored the accelerator. In the whistling wind, he kept reminding himself that I was just a target, a substitute for suffering, and that he was anxious only because he was afraid that I would expose him. But the moment he opened the door of the mansion, David stood at the door, not even daring to move. Everything about me in the house had been cleaned up. Only at the entrance was all the gifts he had given me placed neatly, as well as the unlocked diary. He picked up the unlocked diary. It was as if even his breathing had stopped. "David." Stanley appeared behind him, holding the documents sent by the lawyer in his hand. He flipped through the pages one by one. From the divorce papers to the proof of his cheating. There were also all the gifts he had given to Ashley. Finally, there was the proof that I was leaving with nothing. Every page was mocking this marriage. Compared to the gifts he gave to Ashley, the gifts he had given to me, which were now placed beside him, had become endless perfunctoriness. He ran his fingers through his hair, his mood too complicated to describe. Scenes from the past flashed through his mind. David buried his head in his hands in pain, and even his breathing was out of control. Stanley couldn't help but speak when he saw his appearance. "David, I told you a long time ago that you would regret treating Sarah like this sooner or later. Sarah is such a good woman. We all know that you've liked Sarah for a long time, but you just won't admit it. If you had confessed to Sarah and admitted your mistake earlier, Sarah would have forgiven you." "You?" Stanley was frightened by David's sudden look. "How did your Sarah know the password?" David's voice was hoarse, and he held up the diary in front of Stanley. He suspected that if I hadn't seen this diary, I wouldn't have left. He was even more suspicious that someone was interfering. It wasn't until Stanley mentioned that I studied cryptography in college, and that David even accompanied me to get my diploma, that his expression was surprised, and then turned to a faint pain. He never wanted to keep my affairs in his heart. That superficial perfunctoriness was only blindly believed by me, who was immersed in love. "Find her, no matter the cost. You must find Sarah." Stanley hesitated and didn't leave. Sarah must have left because she was heartbroken. "Find her." David's voice grew louder. After Stanley left, David sat in the silent house. Every breath was a slow torture to him. The jewelry made of scraps had become his last comfort for his longing for me. David put his hand on the jewelry, but pulled it away as if he had been cut by a sharp blade. The diary was blown by the wind, making rustling sounds, turning page after page, as if it was being read. He vaguely saw me standing in the home office, looking desperate when I saw this diary. It was clear that when he wrote this diary, he wanted to remind himself not to forget his original intention and to immerse himself in this relationship that he had created. "Sarah, why didn't I see that in these thousands of days and nights, I had already fallen in love with you?" David looked at the diary and murmured to himself. Tears fell uncontrollably, and he buried his head in his hands. It was remorse, it was sadness. He wanted to kill the David of the past to make up for everything. When David's men arrived at the airport, the plane had already taken off. Even if they had the ability, it was impossible to force the plane to stop. As the plane ascended, I watched them turn into a small black dot. When it passed through the clouds, I could no longer see the city where I had lived for so many years. "David, goodbye, never again." I had already bought a house by the coast and was preparing to open a flower shop. I had told David countless times about it, but he was always busy. Now, David didn't have explain to me anymore, and I could finally fulfill my dream. David's men only picked up my phone that I had thrown away at the airport. Inside the mansion, Stanley handed the phone to David. "David, this is all we got." David took the phone and the broken SIM card. He turned on the phone and just received the message he had sent me before I left. "David, where are you? It hurts so much. Why can't I stand up? Are you back? It hurts so much. Can you bring me a strawberry cake? It hurts so much. Eating something sweet might ease the pain. David, I really love you so much. I can't bear so much pain with less love." David flipped through the messages one by one, his face expressionless, but tears flowed uncontrollably down his face. In my communication with him, most of the time, I was saying that it hurt so much. From the beginning until now, I always had new wounds on top of old ones. There were assassinations by rivals, there was his deliberate calculation to make me a target for Ashley. There were even times when he let his men beat me up in order to act out a play and fight for benefits. All these dangers and tortures were brought to me by him. At that time, he was still complacent, thinking that he had deceived me, this ignorant and simple girl, with just a few sweet words. "Find her again, no matter where Sarah is, you must find her. I'm going to see her." David's voice was trembling. He had decided that even if I was in his rival's territory, he wouldn't care. "David, what's the use of crying? Sarah can't come back." Stanley couldn't help but say. "And what are you going to say to Sarah when you go to see her?" Let her come back and continue to be a shield for Miss Jiang? You originally did everything for Miss Jiang. Now that Sarah is gone, isn't it just right for you to marry Miss Jiang? David slowly shook his head. Ashley is getting married soon. She has nothing to do with me. My wife is Sarah, past, present, and future. David, isn't it a little law to say that now? Stanley's voice suddenly became hoarse, and even his eyes turned red. The signature on the divorce papers has been checked, and it's your signature. Sarah is no longer your wife. It's one thing for her not to know your plan, but now that she knows, why are you still bothering her? Even if Sarah is willing to forgive you and come back to live this life of swords and guns, can you put your conscience at ease? David pressed his chest. He never thought about my feelings. But now that these words were spoken from his brother's mouth, David was silent. He gradually recalled the way we first met. I held flowers and told him that I liked a quiet life, 3 meals a day, the simple pleasures of life, raising 2 or 3 kittens, living in a house facing the ocean, and watching the sunset. But since we had been together, I had never lived such a day. And what are you going to do with Miss Jiang? If Sarah is willing to come back, how will you let her face Miss Jiang? Or are you going to ask me to shut up, fire me too, and then tell Sarah that you don't think you've treated her unfairly after being Mrs. Gu for so many years? David suddenly stood up, staring at Stanley, but only uttered 2 words after a long time, find her. After everyone left, the room was instantly silent. David felt a fear in his heart, and he poured down bottle after bottle of alcohol. But the next second of illusion was clarity. He flipped through his phone countless times. Those messages that he used to be tired of seeing had now become precious. For several days in a row, David only answered calls related to me, and even hung up on calls from Ashley. The phone rang. David almost jumped out of bed and pounced on my phone. But the moment he picked up the phone, he saw that it was a message from Ashley. Sarah, I underestimated you. You actually used this method of disappearing to fool David. But now that you've left, you must hide well. Don't blame me for being ruthless. If you show up again. Above those 2 warning and provocative messages was the one I sent to Ashley, thank you. The sending time was exactly the day I left. David immediately sensed something was wrong and found Ashley at once. She threw herself at David with a delicate air, but David took a step back, mercilessly. What did you say to Sarah? Why would Sarah thank you? Ashley was startled by David's coldness, but she quickly recovered and shook her head hurriedly. What could I possibly say to Sarah? You don't think I forced her to leave, do you? David looked at her in disappointment and pulled out my phone. The screen showed the provocative text message Ashley had sent. And Ashley's phone was snatched away by David's men. On it, David saw that she had lured me to the hotel, seen how she had tricked David into signing the document, and warned me to disappear forever. All the clues now had an answer. For the first time, David's eyes showed a murderous intent. No, David, didn't you marry her to protect me? You should love me, not a scapegoat, a target. Ashley retreated step by step, terrified. She tried to stir up David's love. David suddenly stepped forward, cupped the back of Ashley's head, and their breaths mingled, but there was only fear, no ambiguity. You're right, I will love you well from now on, David said in a hoarse voice, ignoring Ashley's cries, and strode away. The whole world knew that the person David loved deeply was Ashley, and I was just an innocent target. That same day, Ashley's fiancé family broke off the engagement. Those who were targeting David turned their attention to Ashley. Everything I had once suffered was now being replayed on her. Half a month later, when I learned of Ashley's death, I was watching ducklings waddling. The news was brought by a regular customer at the flower shop. She admired the flowers and lamented the impermanence of life. I echoed her sentiments. Ashley, David, these 2 names felt like a lifetime ago. Sarah. A voice sounded, and I turned around, my face instantly turning cold. David rushed over quickly, and the moment I closed the store door, he reached in. His fingers instantly turned purplish blue. He clenched his teeth, unwilling to back down even though he was sweating from the pain. Let me say a few words to you, okay? David's voice was almost pleading. The surrounding customers were also looking over. I had no choice but to open the door and let him in. After calming the customers, I made a cup of coffee and placed it in front of him. Only then did I have time to examine him closely. In just 1 month, he looked as if he had aged 10 years. His hair was faintly gray, and his dark circles were heavy. It was obvious that he wasn't doing well. But I didn't understand. He loved Ashley so much. I had already stepped aside, so why was he not doing well? Sarah, do you really not love me anymore? He started with this sentence, his eyes filled with tears. I stared at him without speaking. I didn't even know how to answer him. Perhaps, from the beginning, the one I loved was not him, but the David he had created, who deeply loved Sarah. Staying by his side and doing these things for him was also for the David who loved me. Seeing that I didn't speak, David seemed very hurt. Sarah, if in the future, I won't let you suffer any more harm, I have really fallen in love with you, are you still willing to come back with me? He looked at me expectantly. I subconsciously leaned back in my chair, distancing myself from him. Are you planning to find another innocent girl to be my scapegoat? And in the end, let her die miserably like I was before, like Ashley is now? David's pupils shook, staring at me in disbelief, as if my words had caused him great pain. In your heart, is that the kind of person I am? I remained silent. Otherwise? What kind of person did he think he was? He was just a demon who claimed to be deeply in love, but inflicted all the pain on OT. Hers. When he loved to the bone, willing to sacrifice everything. When he didn't love, he showed no mercy. David suddenly avoided my eyes. We sat quietly until the sun set. As the last trace of crimson completely disappeared, David sighed deeply. Sarah, I can at least say I watched a sunset with you. I looked at him in surprise, not expecting him to still remember my wish. Hoping that he could watch a sunset with me. Unfortunately, the David at that time was willing to give me everything, except time. Now this companionship had finally arrived. But I was no longer willing to feel it, and only felt the pain in my back. David avoided my eyes again. When he reached the door of the flower shop, he suddenly turned back to look at me. Sarah, I am willing to give up everything, status, property, everything, just to live in obscurity, accompany you to the ends of the earth, watch the sunrise and sunset, plant flowers, raise chickens, cook 3 meals a day. Are you still willing? He looked at me, trembling with nervousness, just like when I said those words to him. But this time, I was the one doing the rejecting. I have already done it myself, and what David has lost can never be recovered. You go chase, you're the one that got away, and I'll pick up my 6pence. It was like that before, it is now, and it will be in the future. For example, the Sarah who once loved David so much could never come back. David avoided my gaze again. This time he left in a mess, not even waiting for me to finish speaking. In the days that followed, David often called me, but I never answered. Later, he wrote to me through various channels. Often, ignorant children would bring the letters and read them to me. He said that he had already fallen in love with me, but he was deeply in love without realizing it. He said that he couldn't even sleep if he didn't see me for a day, and that I had long been integrated into his bones, becoming every part of his life. I listened to the rambling. At first, I would still ask the children to reply to him, telling him not to bother me anymore, that there was no possibility between us. Later, I simply moved. Getting on the plane again, I was a little annoyed, so I simply moved to the territory of David's rival. I thought this would bring me peace. But a year later, I still went to see David. At his funeral, I didn't expect President Gu to die young. Who would have thought? A year ago, David's organized crime seemed to have gone crazy, and began to seek retribution on everyone. It is said that it was for his girlfriend, Ashley. Everyone was lamenting his feelings for Ashley, but only I knew that the place where he finally died was not far from my mansion. Sarah, referred to by David's brother. Miss Sarah. I turned around and saw Stanley standing not far away, waving at me. Entering the house, he handed me a box with red eyes. Actually, that night, David, referred to by his brother, wanted to see you one last time, but he discovered that someone was following him on the way, so. I pursed my lips, my condolences. Sarah, referred to by David's brother, David, referred to by his brother, knew that he was sorry to you. These things were all left to you by him, and all of his industries will be inherited by you. Before he died, he entrusted me with a sentence, asking me to tell you. He begs you not to hate him. As soon as he finished speaking, Stanley was already sobbing uncontrollably. That day, until I left David's funeral, I didn't give Stanley an answer. I couldn't bring myself not to hate him, after all, he had buried my youth. All the industries that David gave me were donated to society by me. I reapplied for a doctorate, and everything became a new beginning.